The sun was slowly dropping behind the tall pine trees when Mark arrived at his old lake cabin. He had not visited the place for almost a year. Work, city noise, and problems had kept him away. Today, he wanted only one thing: peace. The soft wind coming from the lake, the smell of the wet soil, the sound of birds, it all felt like home again. He stepped out of his truck, stretched his back, and smiled. "This is going to be a quiet weekend," he whispered to himself. But he was wrong. Because only 10 seconds later, the silence broke. A sharp voice came from behind the cabin. "Excuse me. You. Stop right there." Mark turned around slowly. A woman marched toward him like she was leading an army. She had short, stiff hair, bright red lipstick, and a tight smile that didn't look friendly at all. She held a clipboard like it was a weapon and wore a shiny badge that said HOA Inspector. Mark didn't remember any HOA here. In fact, he was sure this place never had one. But the woman walked with so much confidence that even the birds fell quiet. She stopped 2 feet away from him and raised her chin. "My name is Karen. I am the head officer of this community's homeowners association," she announced loudly, as if expecting applause. Mark blinked. "Community? This is private lake property," he said calmly. Karen waved her hand impatiently. "Private or not, I enforce the rules around here. And you, sir, are already breaking several." Mark looked around. He had not even unlocked the cabin door yet. "Breaking rules?" he asked, trying not to laugh. Karen leaned forward like she was catching a criminal. "First violation, parking your vehicle too close to the cabin. Second, your cabin paint is too dark. Third, you cannot enter this lake area without HOA permission. And fourth, outsiders are not allowed to stay overnight." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Outsider?" "Yes," she snapped. "I do not recognize you as a resident here, and therefore you must leave." Inside his pocket, Mark's hand tightened around his cabin keys. He knew exactly who he was. He knew exactly what he owned. But something inside him wanted to see how far this strange woman was willing to go with her lies. So he stayed calm. "I see," he replied. "And where is your HOA office located?" Karen froze for 1 second, but only one. Then she quickly pointed toward the road. "Down there. It is a private office. Only HOA staff may enter. You would not understand the rules." Mark smiled a slow, gentle smile. He already understood everything. This woman was pretending to run a fake HOA. But he didn't say that. Not yet. Karen, noticing he was not scared, stepped even closer. "I need your ID. And I need you to sign a temporary removal notice," she demanded, tapping her clipboard aggressively. Mark crossed his arms. "And if I don't?" Karen's left eye twitched. "Then I will call security. I have the power to remove you from this property immediately." The wind blew harder now, making the lake water ripple behind them. It felt like even nature was waiting to see what would happen next. Mark kept his voice steady. "You said you enforce the rules. Could you tell me who created these rules?" Karen spoke without thinking. "I did." That told Mark everything he needed to know. She wasn't part of any official group. She wasn't following any real regulations. She wasn't even trying to hide her false authority. She simply wanted power. Karen tapped her pen on the clipboard. "You have 5 minutes to pack your things and leave the area." Mark couldn't help it, he laughed softly. Karen gasped. "Are you laughing at me? This is a serious matter." "I'm sure it is," he replied calmly. "But tell me, how long have you been running this HOA?" 3 years, she said proudly. "And every resident listens to me. I make sure this lake stays perfect." Mark noticed something in her voice, fear hidden behind confidence. She wasn't protecting the lake. She was protecting her control. He decided to test her more. "Maybe I should speak to one of the neighbors," he suggested. They can confirm if there's really an HOA. Karen panicked for a microsecond, then forced a smile. Oh, the neighbors are busy. They don't like outsiders. They won't help you. Mark started walking toward the cabin door. Karen rushed to block his path, holding her clipboard like a shield. You cannot go inside, she said sharply. That cabin is under HOA review. Review for what? He asked. She looked around quickly, searching for a reason. For structural issues, she said finally. Possible safety risks. Mark unlocked the door anyway. Karen gasped like he had broken a sacred rule. This is not allowed, she screamed. But Mark ignored her and stepped inside. The cabin smelled like old wood, dust, and memories. The sunlight painted golden stripes across the floor. Karen stood at the doorway, furious, breathing heavily. You think you can ignore me, she said, her voice shaking. Mark watched her carefully. She was not used to people questioning her fake power. He spoke calmly. I just came here to relax. I would prefer not to argue. Karen pointed the clipboard at him. You will not relax until you obey. I will write a full report. You will pay heavy fines. You will be removed from the property if needed. Mark leaned against the cabin wall. And who will remove me? Karen lifted her chin. Me. Mark smiled, slowly, silently. This woman had no idea who she was dealing with. She had no idea what he really owned. And she had no idea that every step she took was leading her straight into the biggest mistake of her life. Outside, the lake water touched the shore quietly, almost as if it, too, knew the truth. The truth Karen would soon discover. But not today. Today, she walked away, promising. I'll be back. And next time, you won't escape the rules. Mark watched her leave and whispered to himself. You have no idea, these rules don't apply to me. Not on this land. Not on this lake. And certainly not on this shoreline. The next morning, the lake was silent, calm, and beautiful. A soft fog floated above the water like white cotton. Birds hopped on the wooden fence outside the cabin, singing as if welcoming a new day. Mark stepped outside with a warm cup of coffee in his hand. He breathed in deeply. This was the peace he had missed. He sat on the porch, watching the fog slowly fade. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Until he heard loud footsteps, fast, angry footsteps, crushing the gravel path. Mark didn't need to turn around. He already knew who it was. Karen. She marched toward the cabin like a storm, carrying the same clipboard, but now she also had a small walkie-talkie clipped to her belt, making her look like she worked for a mall security team. There you are, she shouted, before she even reached the porch steps. Mark calmly sipped his coffee. Good morning. Karen ignored the greeting. You were supposed to report to me at 8 a.m. for an HOA inspection. Mark glanced at his watch. It was 7:40. And who told me that? I did, she snapped. I must have missed that announcement, Mark replied. Karen's face tightened like she had bitten a lemon. She clicked her pen aggressively, ready to write something on her clipboard. Violation number 5, she said loudly, speaking as if the trees were her audience. Failure to attend mandatory inspection. Mark watched her write. She scribbled with such force the pen almost tore the paper. When she finished, she turned her sharp eyes toward the cabin windows. I will now perform a property review. I need to make sure your cabin meets HOA standards, she declared. Mark took another sip of coffee. And what exactly are those standards? Karen lifted her chin proudly. My standards. Mark almost choked on his drink, but he kept his expression calm. Karen walked around the cabin, tapping her clipboard on the walls, windows, and railings. She talked loudly to herself. Porch is not regulation height. That window is too large. Roof color is too dark. This wood is too old. That tree is too close. That rock is out of place. She even pointed at a squirrel sitting on a branch and said, "That squirrel might be a problem." Mark raised an eyebrow. "A problem?" "The HOA does not approve wild animals staying near properties," she said seriously. Mark almost burst out laughing. This woman was unbelievable. Karen then reached the lake shore, staring at the sparkling water with a frown. She wrote something again. Mark walked behind her slowly. "What now?" "Violation number 6, she said dramatically. "Unauthorized water access." Mark looked at the lake, confused. "I haven't even touched the water." "You looked at it," she said. "And looking at the lake without HOA permission is still access." Mark felt his patience slipping, but he held it together. She was so confident in her lies that it was almost entertaining to watch. Karen turned around suddenly. "Also, your cabin is too close to the lake." Mark sighed. "This cabin has been here for more than 40 years. "Well, I don't care," Karen replied. "It breaks the HOA shoreline law." "Which law?" She paused, then said quickly. "My law." Mark rubbed his forehead. Before he could speak, they heard voices from the trail near the woods. Two neighbors, an elderly man with a fishing hat and a young couple walking their dog, were coming toward them. Karen's eyes widened. She didn't want them to hear what she was doing. But it was too late. The old man waved at Mark. "Morning, son. Haven't seen you in a long time." Karen jumped in front of them like a referee. "Stop. You cannot speak to him. He is currently under HOA investigation." The old man frowned. "What investigation? And since when do we have an HOA?" Karen's smile twitched. "We have always had an HOA. You just didn't notice." The young woman whispered to her husband. "She's doing it again." Karen spun around. "What was that?" "Nothing," the couple said together. Karen pointed at the dog. "And that dog? That dog needs HOA approval. Dogs are not allowed on the main trail between 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. The husband sighed. "You made that rule last week." Karen shouted, "It is a legal rule." Mark watched the scene carefully. The neighbors were scared of her. Not because she had real power, but because she acted like she did. Karen suddenly pointed at Mark again. "You must pack your bags and leave by tonight," she demanded. "I have decided you are a danger to this community." The old man laughed softly. "A danger? He grew up here." Karen snapped at him. "He is disrespecting HOA authority." "There is no HOA," the young husband finally said. Karen glared at him like she wanted to throw her clipboard. "You all are testing my patience." Mark stepped forward calmly. "Karen, what exactly will you do if I don't leave?" She lifted her walkie-talkie dramatically. "I will call for backup." Mark waited for her to continue. She didn't. Because she had no backup. No team. No members. Just her and her fake rules. She slowly lowered the walkie-talkie and changed the subject quickly. "Anyway," she said in a shaky voice, "I have decided to schedule a mandatory HOA meeting tonight. And you, sir, must attend. We will discuss your removal." Mark smiled politely. "A meeting? Sure. I'll be there." Karen looked victorious and marched away like a queen who believed she controlled the world. But Mark knew the truth. She controlled nothing. And tonight, at her HOA meeting, she was going to learn the biggest truth of her life. That the man she was trying to kick out did not just own the cabin. He owned the entire shoreline. And she had no idea what was coming. The sun was high in the sky when Karen finally disappeared down the trail, leaving a trail of frustration behind her. Mark watched until she was completely out of sight. Only then did he release a long breath. He thought he would get at least a few minutes of quiet, But before he could return inside the cabin, the old man with the fishing hat approached him again. The man moved slowly, like someone careful not to disturb the world around him. "You all right, son?" the old man asked. Mark nodded. "I'm fine. She's something." The old man chuckled in a tired way. "Something?" "She's a whole storm in a small bottle." He looked around nervously before lowering his voice. "Walk with me. Away from the trees. She sometimes hides behind them." Mark didn't know whether to laugh or feel sorry for the man. But he followed anyway. They walked toward the lake shore where the breeze carried only the smell of water, not Karen's perfume and anger. The old man introduced himself as Mr. Lewis. He had lived near the lake for more than 20 years. "She came here about 3 years ago," Lewis explained. "First day, she complained the lake was too wet." That should have been a warning. Mark almost choked. "Too wet?" "Oh yes. Then she started making rules," Lewis continued. "Rules nobody asked for. She printed fake badges, fake notices, even fake fines." "Do people actually pay them?" Mark asked. Lewis shrugged sadly. "Some. She scares the newer families. Tells them if they don't follow her rules, she'll get their homes removed. Of course she can't, but not everyone knows that." Mark felt something twist in his chest. He hated bullies. How does she get away with it? Lewis pointed a shaky finger toward a group of cabins across the water. "They're scared to speak. Folks just want peace. Not trouble." Before Mark could say anything, the young couple from earlier walked toward them with their dog tugging at the leash. The woman smiled politely. "Hi, sorry about earlier," she said. "Karen gets louder when she feels threatened. Or when she wakes up. Or when she sleeps," her husband added. Mark smirked. "I'm starting to notice." The couple introduced themselves as Liam and Emily. They were friendly, warm, but also nervous, often glancing over their shoulders like Karen might appear from behind a rock. Emily pulled her hair behind her ear and asked quietly, "Are you really going to her meeting tonight?" Mark shrugged. "She invited me. And I'm curious." Liam stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You should know the truth. She doesn't hold real meetings. She holds performances." "Performances?" Mark repeated, confused. "She stands at the front of the group and talks like she's the president of the universe," Emily said. "And she makes everyone sit in chairs that she arranged exactly 2 feet apart. If someone moves their chair, she screams." Lewis nodded. "Last month, she banned campfires. Because she said smoke pollutes her aura." Mark blinked. "Her aura?" "Yes," Emily whispered. Mark rubbed his forehead. This was unbelievable. Liam spoke again. "We all know she's not part of any official HOA. But she acts like she is, and some people don't question her." Mark looked at them all, Lewis with his tired eyes, Emily holding the dog nervously, and Liam with his arms crossed like someone protecting his family. He understood what was happening. Karen didn't have power. She had fear. Fear she planted in these people until they believed she controlled the lake. But Mark wasn't afraid of her. And for the first time, the neighbors noticed that. Emily pointed at his cabin. "So, are you really staying? After she threatened you?" "I grew up here," Mark said softly. "I'm not leaving because of her." Liam smiled a little. "Good. Someone needs to stand up to her." Lewis pulled out a folded paper from his pocket. "Son, before you face her tonight, you should know what happened last summer." Mark unfolded the paper. It was a fake HOA violation notice, printed on cheap paper with a logo that looked like Karen had drawn it with crayons. At the bottom, it said, "Fine, $300. Must be paid in cash only." Mark looked up. "She actually charges people?" Lewis sighed. "She charged Liam and Emily for hanging a hammock. She charged Mrs. Warren for planting flowers. She charged me 3 times for fishing too loudly. Mark stared at him. Fishing too loudly? Lewis nodded seriously. I don't even talk when I fish. I just sit. Emily shook her head. She makes up rules every week. Last month she tried to ban swimming because she said the water gets tired. Liam added, she banned music too. Said it interrupts the lake's thoughts. Mark exhaled slowly. This wasn't just annoying anymore. This was control. This was manipulation. This was someone taking advantage of quiet, gentle people. Lewis touched Mark's arm lightly. I know you don't seem scared of her. But be careful. Karen doesn't like when someone doesn't follow her rules. She grows louder. Emily hugged her dog closer. She might try to embarrass you tonight. Or make the neighbors vote against you. Mark smiled calmly, too calmly. I'm okay with that. Because he already had a plan. A plan he hadn't shared with anyone yet. He looked at the lake, water sparkling under the sunlight. This lake was more than beautiful scenery. It was part of his family history. Part of the land deed he carried in his truck. Part of the truth Karen didn't know. Liam asked quietly. So, will you go to the meeting? Oh yes, Mark said. I'll be there. Lewis frowned. It won't be pleasant. Maybe not, Mark replied. But it will be important. Emily took a deep breath. Karen wants control more than anything. She will try to break you. Mark gave a small smile, one that held more confidence than they expected. She can try, he said softly. But she can't break someone who owns the ground she's standing on. The neighbors looked at him, confused. They didn't understand yet. But they would. And when night came, Karen would learn the truth in front of everyone. Tonight, at her fake HOA meeting. Her entire world of pretend power was about to fall apart. The afternoon sun had started turning golden when Mark heard something strange outside his cabin. It sounded like metal scraping wood, mixed with loud, bossy commands. He stepped out onto the porch and immediately understood. Karen was back. And this time, she wasn't alone. She had brought 4 folding chairs, a small table, a stack of papers, and a bright orange construction cone for no clear reason. She was dragging the chairs across the ground, placing them in a perfect line 2 inches apart right in front of Mark's cabin like she was preparing for a royal ceremony. She didn't even look up when she said, "Do not interrupt. This requires precision." Mark leaned on the porch railing. "What exactly are you doing now?" Karen stood straight, hands on her hips, eyes narrow with power. "I am preparing for tonight's HOA meeting. It will be held right here, in front of your cabin. This location has been chosen for maximum discipline." Mark raised an eyebrow. "Discipline?" "Yes," she said. "People behave better when they sit in straight lines." Mark watched her carefully adjust each chair again and again. She knelt down to measure the distance between them using a ruler she pulled from a fanny pack. He had never seen someone take their fake authority so seriously. Karen moved to place the orange cone in the center. "This cone is for me," she declared proudly. "It marks my speaking position." Mark blinked slowly. "The cone?" "Yes." She tapped it. "It shows my authority." Before he could respond, she handed him a piece of paper. The title at the top read, "Mandatory HOA Meeting Agenda." Mark scanned it. The items were unbelievable. Discuss removal of the new lake intruder, Mark. Review color rules. Decide if squirrels are allowed. Vote on lake energy protection. Approve new fees. Karen's speech of wisdom and leadership. He looked at her. "You wrote all of this?" Karen puffed her chest proudly. "Of course. Leadership must come from a visionary." Mark had never heard someone praise themselves with so much passion. She grabbed a megaphone from her bag, an actual megaphone, and pointed it at the empty woods. "Attention residents," she shouted, even though nobody was there. "The HOA meeting will begin at sunset. Failure to attend will result in penalties." Her voice echoed across the lake. Mark imagined fish swimming deeper just to escape her. When she finished shouting, she turned to him again. "You need to sit in the back row," she instructed. "You are the subject of tonight's disciplinary vote." Mark folded his arms. "Who exactly is voting?" Karen smirked. "Everyone. And they will vote against you. They always listen to me." She said it with such confidence, as if the whole world bent around her rules. Mark didn't reply. He just watched her continue her setup. She placed a plastic bell on the table. "What's that for?" he asked. "My power bell," she said. "People must ask permission to speak. Only after I ring the bell." Mark stared at her for a long moment. She truly believed she was in control. Karen walked toward him again, clipboard in hand. "I have reviewed your cabin. The violations are worse than I thought." She clicked her pen dramatically. "You might even break the ultimate rule." Mark lifted an eyebrow. "The what?" "The ultimate rule," she repeated. "Rule number 1. No resident may challenge the HOA leader." Mark almost laughed. "Who wrote that?" "I did," she said proudly. Of course she did. Before he could answer, Liam and Emily appeared on the trail with their dog again. They stopped when they saw Karen and her megaphone. Emily whispered, "Oh no, she's preparing the battlefield." Karen pointed her megaphone at them. "You too. Arrive 15 minutes early tonight. I need you in the front row." "Why?" Liam asked carefully. "So you can help guide the vote against this man," she said, pointing at Mark as if he were a wild animal. Emily blinked. "Why would we do that?" Karen's smile twitched. "Because I said so. And you must obey HOA law." Liam crossed his arms. "What law?" "You made it all up." Karen gasped so loudly even the birds flew away. "How dare you question authority?" Emily tugged Liam's arm. "Leave it," she whispered. "She's in full dragon mode." Karen spun back toward Mark. "And you? You should know tonight, the community will decide your fate." "My fate?" Mark repeated calmly. "Yes," she said. "You will be voted out for disturbing lake harmony." Mark smiled softly. "I didn't disturb anything." Karen slammed her clipboard shut. "You existed. That is enough." Then she lowered her voice dramatically. "When this meeting is over, you will no longer step near this lake." She waited for him to react. He didn't. That bothered her. She pointed a shaking finger at him. "You're too calm." "That worries me." Mark shrugged. "I don't scare easily." Karen narrowed her eyes. "Maybe you should." She stomped away to set up the chairs again, measuring, adjusting, realigning like a dictator preparing for a royal parade. As the sun dipped lower, neighbors slowly peeked from their cabins, whispering. "Is she serious? She brought a cone? Why is she yelling at squirrels?" Mark noticed something new. People weren't just afraid of her anymore. They were embarrassed by her. And they were looking at Mark differently too, almost with hope. Lewis appeared from behind a tree, hands in his pockets. "She's planning something big tonight," he said softly. "I know," Mark replied. "You ready?" Lewis asked. Mark looked at the chairs, the cone, the megaphone, and the woman who thought she ruled the world. "Yes," he said calmly. "She has no idea what's coming. Because tonight, in front of everyone, Karen would learn the truth she feared most. Her rules meant nothing. Her power was pretend. Her authority was built on lies. And the man she was planning to remove Was the man who owned the ground under her feet? Tonight's meeting wouldn't end the way she wanted. It would end the way it was always meant to. With truth. With exposure. With Karen finally losing the kingdom she never really had. By the time the sun started sinking behind the trees, the lake had turned gold. The water looked peaceful, too peaceful for what was about to happen. Mark stood inside his cabin, watching the shadows stretch across the porch. He could already hear Karen outside, barking orders like a general on a battlefield. No, no, no. The chairs must be in a perfect line. Move it an inch left. Not that left, the other left. Mark stepped outside slowly. He didn't hurry. He didn't need to. Tonight would speak for itself. Karen spotted him instantly. There you are, she shouted. You're late. It's 5 minutes early, Mark replied calmly. Karen pointed at her watch, one of those oversized watches that looked more like a toy than a real one. HOA time is different from normal time, she said proudly. Mark didn't even bother responding. Neighbors had begun gathering. Some carried lanterns. Some carried blankets. Some looked nervous. Others looked tired of Karen's endless rules. Louis walked up to Mark with a worried expression. Good luck, son. She's in full volcano mode tonight. Mark nodded. I'm ready. Emily and Liam came next. Their dog sniffed the ground but barked every time Karen's megaphone squeaked. Emily whispered, We're sitting near you. She's less scary when we're together. Liam added, Also, we want front row seats for whatever is about to happen. Mark smiled slightly. The sun dipped low. The first star appeared in the sky. Karen blew a whistle, a loud, piercing sound that echoed across the lake. The HOA meeting is now starting, she announced through her megaphone, though she was only 3 feet away from everyone. People winced and covered their ears. Karen stood in her authority cone, chest lifted proudly. Her clipboard was held like a sacred book. She adjusted her glasses, cleared her throat dramatically, and began. Welcome, residents, she said with great importance. Today we gather for a very serious issue. A threat to our community. A danger to our rules. She pointed her megaphone directly at Mark's chest. Him. Some neighbors gasped, not because they agreed with her, but because she was being so dramatic it was almost comedy. Mark didn't react. Karen continued, This man has broken many HOA laws. He has refused to follow my instructions. He has disturbed lake harmony. He parked incorrectly. He looked at the lake without permission. Liam whispered, She's insane. Emily nudged him to be quiet, but she couldn't stop giggling. Karen slammed her clipboard against her hand. And worst of all, she said, voice shaking with fake anger. He has challenged MY authority. Silent pause. Karen expected people to gasp in horror. Instead, a cricket chirped. Annoyed, she continued loudly. As the HOA leader, I demand a vote for his removal from the property. Louis raised a hand. We don't even have an HOA. Karen snapped at him, Not when you lead. But when I lead, we do. Emily muttered under her breath, What does that even mean? Karen ignored everyone and lifted her bell. This bell will control who speaks. No one may talk unless I ring it. To demonstrate, she rang it once. Ding. Nobody spoke. Mark stayed calm. He watched her. Observed her. Let her words float around like dust that didn't matter. Karen cleared her throat again. We will start with a speech from me, she said, even though she had already given 3 speeches since sunset. Nobody objected, but nobody seemed interested either. Karen began pacing like a politician about to reveal a new law. Residents, she said loudly. We must protect our lake from outsiders. Outsiders change things. Outsiders break rules. Outsiders bring chaos. She looked straight at Mark. This man is an outsider. Louis squinted. But he grew up here. Karen's eyelid twitched. I mean, he is now an outsider. Liam raised a hand. Based on what? Karen shook her head. I don't need a reason. HOA law does not require one. Because I am the law. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Karen finally turned to her clipboard. I will now read the list of violations he committed. She flipped page after page after page, all filled with her messy handwriting. Mark counted at least 14 pages. Karen began reading. Violation 1, parking too close to cabin. Violation 2, cabin too close to lake. Violation 3, porch too wood-like. Violation 4, roof too roofy. Mark sighed. Karen continued proudly. Violation 22, breathing loudly. Violation 23, standing quietly. Violation 24, thinking too much. Emily covered her mouth to hold back laughter. Karen slapped the pages dramatically. And finally, violation 32, failure to respect HOA leader. She stared at him triumphantly. Mark stepped forward slightly. Are you done? Karen nearly choked. You don't speak until I ring the bell. She rang it twice, reluctantly. Ding. Ding. Now you may speak, she said, crossing her arms. Mark looked around at the crowd. People were waiting. Nervous. Curious. Tired of Karen. But waiting. He spoke calmly, clearly. I appreciate your effort. But before we talk about violations, we should first ask one question. Karen frowned. What question? Mark took a slow breath. A simple one. He stepped down from the porch, walking toward the center. The neighbors leaned in, eyes wide. He raised his voice enough for everyone to hear. Who said there is an HOA here? Silence. Karen laughed loudly, fake and sharp. I said so. I am the. Mark held up a hand. And who gave you that authority? Karen opened her mouth. No words came out. He continued. I came here this week. You told me to leave. You wrote violations. You demanded I follow rules you created. But here's the truth. He paused. Even the crickets stopped. This is not your land to control. Karen stepped back. What are you trying to say? Mark looked at the neighbors, not at her. I'm saying this meeting started wrong. Because we're talking about rules that don't exist, on property that doesn't belong to her. Gasps. Whispers. Karen froze, staring at him like he had spoken another language. What do you mean not my property? She demanded. Mark didn't answer yet. He just smiled slightly, in a way that made her nervous. Tonight wasn't just about a meeting. It was about the truth Karen had avoided for years. And Mark was finally ready to reveal it. But not yet. He let the suspense rise, like a wave preparing to crash. The crowd leaned forward. Karen clenched her jaw. And Mark said quietly, there's something you all need to see. The neighbors waited. Karen shook her head, and oh. No. I am the leader here. I decide what we see. I decide. But Mark cut her off. Tonight, he said, we finish this. And everything was about to change. The night air grew colder, and the lake turned dark like black glass. A little wind blew across the water, making small ripples that sounded like whispers. Everyone could feel something important was about to happen. Mark walked slowly toward his cabin door. The porch light shined behind him, casting a long shadow across the ground. That shadow stretched all the way to where Karen stood. She swallowed hard. People watched closely. Emily held Liam's arm. Louis stood with a worried look. A few neighbors shifted on their chairs nervously. Mark reached into the cabin and pulled out a thick, old folder. The edges were rough, the paper yellow. It looked like something from a lawyer's office or a history museum. Karen frowned. What is that? Mark didn't answer yet. He placed the folder on a wooden table, gently, like it was something valuable. He looked at the crowd, then at Karen. You asked who gave you authority, Mark said. But the real question is, who actually owns this land? Karen crossed her arms tightly. Obviously the HOA manages it. There is no HOA, Mark cut in calmly. There has never been one. Gasps spread through the crowd. Karen shook her head fast. You're wrong. I run the HOA. I make the rules. Mark opened the folder. Inside were several documents, old maps, legal papers, property descriptions, signatures, seals. The neighbors leaned closer. Karen's voice cracked. Where did you get those? Mark looked straight into her eyes. My grandfather. The crowd murmured again. Louis stepped forward suddenly. Wait, your grandfather? I remember that man. He bought this cabin years before any of us came here. Mark nodded. And when he bought it, he didn't just buy the cabin. Emily tilted her head. What did he buy? Mark pulled out the first paper, a large map with faded ink. He held it up. This, he said, is the original Shoreline ownership map from 1964. Karen blinked rapidly. That doesn't mean anything. Mark pointed to the map. Actually, it means everything. The map clearly showed the lake. Around the entire edge of it, the whole shoreline, a bold black line circled the water. Inside that black line was a name. His grandfather's name. Karen gasped so loudly that everyone looked at her. Mark continued calmly. This map shows that my grandfather didn't only buy the cabin. He bought the entire shoreline. Every inch of land that touches the water. A wave of shock hit the crowd. Liam whispered, he owns the whole lake edge? Emily nodded slowly. Every part we stand on right now. Mark placed the map down and picked up another paper. This is the deed, he said. It confirms the shoreline is private property. My grandfather bought it 59 years ago. And when he passed away, he looked at the crowd. He left everything to me. Karen stumbled backward like her legs stopped working. That can't be true. That can't be true. Louis rubbed his forehead. It makes sense. I remember when I first moved here, the real estate guy said something about special shoreline rights. I thought it was nothing, but this is it. A few neighbors nodded. Some whispered in disbelief. Others stared at Mark in pure surprise. Karen rushed toward the table, grabbing the papers. These are fake, she yelled. You printed these on your computer. Mark smiled. My grandfather didn't own a computer. In fact, these documents are older than your HOA claims. Karen looked at the map again. It was clearly old creases, yellow paper, official stamps, signatures, and seals from the county office. She dropped it like it burned her fingers. Mark pulled out the last document, a modern one with clean edges. This is from the county records office, he explained. It confirms that I still own the shoreline. I updated the registration last year. Karen's face turned pale. So, what does that mean? A neighbor asked nervously. Mark folded his arms. It means everything that touches the lake, docks, boats, fishing spots, even the path you walk to reach the water, is on my property. Emily's jaw dropped. All of it? Mark nodded. All of it. A long silence followed. The only sound was the wind passing through the trees. Karen suddenly slammed her fist on the table. That still doesn't mean you can break my rules, she shouted. Mark stepped closer to her, voice steady. You don't have rules here. You never did. Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mark spoke again, louder this time, not angry, but confident. You tried to remove me from land that belongs to me. You tried to control property that you don't own. And you tried to scare people using rules that don't exist. The crowd turned toward Karen. Some frowned. Some shook their heads. Some whispered things like she lied to us, and we trusted her? Karen looked around desperately. No. No, listen. I didn't lie. I was trying to bring order. Someone had to lead. Someone had to be in charge. Lewis stepped forward calmly. But you weren't in charge of anything, he said. You were just loud. Karen's face burned red. Emily took a small step toward Mark. So, what happens now? Mark looked at everyone, kind eyes, steady breath. I'm not here to kick anyone out, he said. I'm not here to fight. I just want peace. This is the lake I grew up on. I want all of us to enjoy it. The neighbors nodded, relieved. So, Mark continued, I think it's time for something simple. Karen lifted her chin. And what's that supposed to be? She snapped. Mark looked at her with a calm that made her even more nervous. It's time, he said quietly. For you to stop pretending you're the boss. The crowd let out a mix of gasps and laughter. Karen's mouth dropped open. Mark picked up the documents again, placed them neatly in the folder, and closed it. The truth is out, he said. And it changes everything. Karen stood frozen, humiliated, confused, powerless for the first time. The neighbors watched her. The lake watched her. And the night felt alive with tension. Because the real showdown was about to begin. The night had grown deep. The lake shimmered under the moonlight, calm and silent, like nothing had ever happened. But Karen was far from calm. She stood frozen, staring at the papers Mark had just shown everyone. The shoreline deeds, the old maps, the county registration, all proving that the man she tried to evict owned everything she thought she controlled. Karen's lips trembled. Her hands shook. Her clipboard, which had been her weapon for years, now felt useless, almost ridiculous in her grip. This can't be, she stammered, trying to regain her composure. I am the leader. I control this lake. Mark stepped closer, his calm presence contrasting her chaos. You control nothing, Karen. You never did. This land is mine. The lake belongs to me. And your fake HOA? It's over. The neighbors, Lewis, Emily, Liam, and others who had been quietly watching, finally spoke up. Enough, Lewis said firmly. We won't follow your made-up rules anymore. Karen's face twisted with fury and disbelief. But you can't take my authority. Mark shook his head gently. You never had authority. You only had fear. And fear is easy to break. Karen's knees wobbled. She tried to shout, tried to call on some imaginary power. Her voice cracked. You all were supposed to follow me. I am the HOA. No one responded. Emily whispered, it's finally over. Liam added, you can't rule a lake with lies and fear. Karen's chest heaved. She looked around, realizing that every neighbor had turned toward Mark, the rightful owner, and that no one was on her side. For the first time in years, Karen felt powerless. She stomped her feet, picked up her megaphone, and tried to shout, but the sound was weak, pathetic. The wind carried it away. Even the lake seemed to ignore her. Mark took a deep breath and spoke softly, but firmly. Karen, you can stay. But you must stop pretending. Stop making rules that don't exist. Stop threatening people. And most importantly, stop trying to control what isn't yours. Karen's eyes darted around, desperate for any support. But there was none. Even the trees seemed silent, bearing witness to her defeat. She let out a long, defeated sigh. Her clipboard dropped to the ground with a thud that echoed across the lake. Mark stepped aside, gesturing toward the water. This lake has been peaceful for decades. I want it to stay that way. No more fear. No more fake rules. Just respect. That's all I ask. The neighbors nodded, some smiling, some wiping tears. The tension dissolved slowly, like mist over the water in the morning. Karen, humiliated and exhausted, turned toward the trail and began walking back toward her car. She muttered to herself. I tried to help. But no one listened. Mark stepped onto the lake shore, feeling the cool sand beneath his feet. He looked at the water shimmering under the moonlight. He felt a wave of calm that had been missing for years. Lewis came beside him. You did it, son. You didn't fight. You didn't scream. You just showed the truth. Emily smiled. And finally, we can enjoy this place without fear. Liam added, I can't believe she made all those rules up. 4 years. Mark shook his head. People only follow rules when they think they are real. Once the truth is clear, they follow the truth, not fear. The neighbors looked at the lake, the cabins, the moonlight reflecting on the water. A soft breeze blew, and the night felt alive, but peaceful. Meanwhile, Karen's car disappeared down the road. She would no longer haunt this lake with her fake authority. She had tried to kick out the rightful owner, but in the end, she had only kicked herself out of power. Mark smiled faintly. This lake, these cabins, the shoreline, they're not mine just because I own them. They belong to everyone who respects them. He took a deep breath, feeling the soft night air on his face. For the first time in years, the lake belonged to no one and everyone at the same time, just as it should. The neighbors stayed for a while, sharing stories, laughing quietly, and feeling safe for the first time. Mark looked toward the horizon. The moonlight danced on the water, the night birds sang softly, and everything felt right. He whispered to himself. Some people try to control what isn't theirs. But truth always finds a way. And for the lake, for the cabins, for Mark, and for everyone who had been afraid, peace had finally returned. Karen had tried to rule, tried to scare, tried to dominate. But the lake, and the people who loved it, had the final say. And that night, the shoreline stood quiet, proud, and free.